So one of the things that seemed to capture everyone's attention like instantly once it appeared in The Mandalorian is the phrase, "This is the way." And this thing has appeared everywhere, like completely unrelated to Star Wars posts on the internet. Someone will say, "This is the way," and then you'll have a long string of people responding, "This is the way." And it got me curious, what exactly is the way? So let's talk about what I found. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Taylor Campbell here, and welcome back to Comic Crash, my little show on the internet where we talk about comic books and stuff. And today, the stuff we're talking about The Mandalorian. I've really been taken back by how great this show is, and Disney started kind of doing this Mando Monday thing where they talk about The Mandalorian on Mondays, and I figured, why not go ahead and give that a shot? So here we are. Let's talk about The Mandalorian, and specifically, let's talk about the way. So any organization, anywhere, any club, any religion, anything will have its own specific rules that you need to follow in order to be a part of said club. And in the TV show, we get a little bit of a glimpse as to what the rules are to be a Mandalorian, but then we also see that no one really seems to agree what it is. We have different clans fighting over who is the true form of Mandalorian. At one point in the second season, we have Bo-Katan, Boba Fett, and Din Djarin all living completely different ways and all claiming to be Mandalorians. So this got me thinking, what exactly is this way that we keep talking about? What is the way? And so I hopped online and I did tons of research and I combined everything I could find, and I think I found pretty much what the rules are in order to be a Mandalorian. Let's go ahead and hop into this already. So when we're talking about the Mandalorians, we have to go all the way back to the Nair, which is a set of 6 different specific rules that make up the entirety of Mandalorian culture. These came about around 7,000 years before Episode 4 happened, and was like the core element of the religion of the original Mandalorians. These are their 10 commandments, these 6 rules in the Nair. Rule number 1, you must wear the armor. Rule number 2, you must speak the language. Rule number 3, you have to be able to defend your family, both physically and defend their honor. Rule number 4, you need to raise your children as Mandalorians. Number 5, you have to contribute to the clan's welfare. And number 6, if the Mandalore, pretty much the king of the Mandalorians, calls for your aid, you must go to them. So, neat. But what are the purposes of these 6 rules? And how do they apply to the Mandalorian? So they talked about this a little bit at the end of the first season of The Mandalorian, but Mandalorians aren't really a race, it's a creed, and it started off back in the very beginning. Like I said, about 7,000 years before Episode 4 happens. The progenitors to the Mandalorians, the Tong, they were really good at letting other races and other people join their order. Anyone who they felt was an honorable combatant, they would invite to come into the order. And so we get the first 2 rules from this. Rule number 1, you need to wear the armor. The reason for that is because regardless of who you are underneath, on the outside, you are the same as anyone else. Pretty cool concept. Rule number 2 is relatively the same, that you must speak the language. Again, doesn't matter who you are or where you came from, you're Mandalorian, so you speak the language just like any other Mandalorian would. Rules 3, 4, and 5 all have to deal with family and guarantee that the family is center to the Mandalorian culture. When we're talking about family in regards to Mandalorians, we specifically are talking about parents and immediate children. When we're talking about clans, you can kind of think of that as like extended family. So when we have, you need to be able to defend your family physically and with honor, we're talking, you need to be able to defend your parents or your siblings, like your immediate family. And when we talk about raising kids as Mandalorians, that's meant to make sure that this way is passed on to the next generation. And then when we're talking about contributing to the clan, that's like when you go to Thanksgiving dinner and you have that one deadbeat aunt who shows up. She brought like a 2-liter of soda and set it on the table and just brags about how cool they are and doesn't really help anyone. That's not contributing to the clan. That's bad. That is not the way. In fact, family is so important to the Mandalorian culture that this kind of explains why Jango Fett's payment request for being the donor for the clone army was an unaltered clone of himself that he could raise as his son, and why we keep seeing Mandalorians find children and then pretty much adopt them into their society and into their family, because family is the center of the Mandalorian culture. And then, of course, 6 has to deal with the government. If the government needs your help, then you just, go for it. It's very basic. And see, that was the big problem with the Resolnair. It was basic. It didn't, define anything. And that was a big problem for the Mandalorians for a couple thousand years. We jump forward to about 4,000 years before Episode 4, and we get the first real attempt to try and define these rules and to kind of explain the situations in which they apply. We call this the Canons of Honor. Now, the Canons of Honor were created by the Mandalorian Crusaders, who went on almost like this religious mission to try and unite the galaxy, and those who wouldn't unite with the galaxy, they would conquer, because they're crazy jetpack cowboys. Of course they do. And the Canons of Honor came about specifically putting more emphasis on being a warrior, so the defense of family rules, defense of clan. They put less emphasis on immediate family and more emphasis on clans at this time. And this was kind of the way that things went for a very long time, until we started to see a shift as we got closer to the Clone Wars. When we get closer to the Clone Wars, we have 2 factions that split off, and they tried to define the way as best as they could. You had the new Mandalorians, who were led by people like Duchess Satine, who were very pacifist, put a lot of emphasis on not being a warrior and honor through non-interference, so to speak. And then you have Death Watch, who are built up of very violent people who care less about family and clans and more about the old form of government, as well as their defense of that government. So they were a lot more violent. Now, this is where we get a split that I think is very important to mention, especially since I think it'll start coming back in The Mandalorian and maybe in the Book of Boba Fett. Let me tell you why. In canon, you pretty much have these 2 groups that split off and eventually died out, and what rose in their place were the quote, true Mandalorians led by Bo-Katan. In Legends, though, you have a very important figure, Jasper Nereel. He was Jango Fett's adopted father, and he came up with something called the Super Commando Codex. The Super Commando Codex is a very long list of hundreds of extra rules that kind of specify when the 6 rules of the Resolnair apply. When can you take off your helmet? Can you take off your helmet in front of people? Can you take off your armor in front of other people? How do romantic relationships work? What defines family? What defines clan? What defines government? All of these things are in the Super Commando Codex. Unfortunately, we don't have too many rules from that, but that, in Legends at least, is what spawned the Legends version of the true Mandalorians that were eventually established after the Empire was defeated and when Boba Fett took his place as the ruler of Mandalore. So, outside of the 6 rules of the Resolnair, as well as, hundreds in the Super Commando Codex that we don't know because they've never been written down anywhere, the next best thing we can do to try and define what the Mandalorian way is to look at some of the traditions that have always been there. And from my research, I was able to find 4. Tradition 1 is that Mandalorians are warriors. So you could be anything you want. If you're a Mandalorian, you could be a pop star, you could be a world-class chef, you could be a construction worker, but at the end of the day, you are a warrior. So combat training is likely going to be a part of the Mandalorian way. Tradition 2, the Mandalorian will acquire the materials themselves for their armor. Now, it used to be that you had to make your armor, but as we can see from the Mandalorian TV series, that doesn't seem to be the case. It looks like you just need to acquire the materials yourself, either through inheritance, like Sabine Wren did, or through your own work and your own efforts, as Din Djarin does. Tradition 3, experience comes first. If the king of the Mandalorians, the Mandalore, is not the most experienced in a particular job, they will appoint someone else who is to be party leader, and that's okay. So experience trumps everything. In Tradition 4, Mandalorians are well behaved and well mannered in all things. They are extremely professional when they take a job, they are extremely professional when they finish a job, and whenever they address people, they will address them in the most professional and appropriate manner. Note how in episode 5, Boba Fett never does say Han Solo. He always calls him Captain Solo because he's a military captain and he has his own ship that he's been captaining for years. He deserves to be recognized by the rank of captain in Boba Fett's mind. So, there you go. The rules and regulations of being a Mandalorian. So next time you're on the internet or you're anywhere and you say this is the way, now you have a frame of reference. So I hope you found this video interesting. I had a lot of fun researching it. So if you found this interesting and you'd like to hear more about how Mandalorians work, or if you think this is kind of an interesting topic, let me know in the comments below and maybe I can make some more of these. But in the meantime, thank you for joining me. Have a great day, and remember to always be your best self.